Welcome to our podcast series, Getting to the Core Issues. Hello, I'm Joanne Bellata.
And I'm Marianne Harmson.
Each segment, we will interview healthcare innovators whose models will help transform the healthcare delivery system and provide solutions to the healthcare puzzle. Today's guest is Kevin J. Roberts, author and director of Empower ADD Project. Good morning, Kevin, and welcome to our show.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
We're
good.
Great.
Very good.
Very happy to be here. I love what you're doing, and I hope I can shed some light and help people who are listening get to the core issues that surround the condition we know as ADHD.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about the school system and the role it plays.
I had a lot of struggles with the school system. I mean, even just getting my son diagnosed with ADHD. I recognized that there was something wrong in elementary school, like 5th or 6th grade. He started struggling with reading and being able to pay attention and sit and focus on his homework assignments, which at that time was nothing major. It was more, drawing a picture and then writing a few sentences about, what he drew. He couldn't sit still and focus on doing that. And so I had gone to the teachers and it's just, we'll work with him. They put a tutor with them to work with him on his reading skills. And they said, it's just immaturity, whatever. By the time he went into the 7th grade, he was really struggling, particularly in English. Math, for some reason, he could do math. He was just phenomenal in math. But English and then anything where he had to read and write something, he just couldn't organize his thoughts and be able to put it down on paper at all. And I had gone to his English teacher because he was failing English and said, look, can you tutor him? What's your action plan? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, he can come after school and, and we'll tutor him. Then he comes home and I said, well, did you go see the English teacher? You're supposed to meet with her to get tutoring. He goes, oh, no, we went and did country line dancing because she teaches a country line dancing class. So I called up the teacher and I said, well, what happened here? And she said, oh, he seems to prefer country line dancing to having to do English. I said, of course he does. Who wouldn't, right? And if you're a kid in that situation. So I was angry. I went and I met with the assistant principal and I said, and several other teachers had told me too that, he would come in and I knew he did his homework because that was the nightly battle to get his homework done. And he would go into the classroom and then his homework wouldn't get handed in. And the teachers would tell me he didn't do his homework. I'm like, well, that's not true. I said, I know he did his homework. And they went and checked his locker. His locker was all in disarray. And the homework, sure enough, was there, but it was in the bottom of a pile under the rest of the papers and the books. But they found other homework assignments that they claimed he didn't do there too, because he couldn't organize himself to move it from the locker and his backpack over to school. I met with the assistant superintendent, the assistant principal at the school, and he told me, oh, don't worry about him because he was looking by the end of middle school that he wasn't going to graduate and move on to high school. And they told me, well, don't worry about it. It's the middle school funk. And we have 19 other kids that are in the same situation as your son. But don't worry, when he gets to, high school, these things tend to straighten themselves out. I was very upset. He did make it out of middle school. He got into high school and fortunately got a guidance counselor who had a son who has ADHD and executive functioning disorder and recognized it immediately and got him tested, got him on an IEP, but he struggled all throughout high school and barely made it out of high school. The school system to me kind of failed my son.
And it failed my brother Dan, and it also failed Oscar Schindler. Like I said, Oscar Schindler failed out of school. One of the things that happens is, a guy like your son, a guy like my brother Dan, a guy like Oscar Schindler, these are people who like to be in motion. They like to be, of course he liked line dancing because that was something physical. Too bad they couldn't have incorporated the line dancing with some type of tutoring. And I do that all the time. I incorporate movement into stuff that I do when I work with kids. The school system, first of all, we have this vocational training track, but that's a less than situation. Children who are, they go to the mechanical technical school, for part of their classes nowadays, some of their classes, that's less than. We make children like, well, you can't do the academics, you're less than. Think about Oscar Schindler. This is a guy who hated school. He was a lot like your son, didn't like to write things down. If you've seen the movie Schindler's List, you remember Oscar Schindler's its ex-chairman is trying to give him the statistics, and he says, I can finish my lunch in peace, or I can get a headache from reading this. And so he wanted the summary. He didn't want to get all the details. And he wasn't good at that. He was good at action, movement, purpose-driven intensity. And so school does not play to those things. School plays to, are you good at sitting still? Are you good at keeping your mouth shut? Are you good at filling in rote worksheets that really have little bearing on life or learning? These are the skills that unfortunately school a lot of times requires. So I would love to have schools, especially in the younger years, that honor the skills that people like my brother have, that honor the types of skills that Oscar Schindler had, that honor your son, the skills that he has. Because, the problem is you get to adulthood and these people, they have low self-esteem.
Exactly.
My brother still thinks he's a screw up. I'm sitting in my home in front of a wall just behind me. There's a wall that had the foundation had a hole in it. I'm only sitting here because my brother dug a ditch with his friends and filled it in and fixed my wall for me. He didn't know what he was doing, but that's often what, ADHD people, we just like to kind of sometimes go headlong into things. I have for whatever reason, I have a lot of the same tendencies as my brother, but I got that academic gene. I can do school. But I still, for the most part, didn't enjoy it, but I was able to get through and do stuff and get what I needed. But I just see a lot of young people for whom school it's friction. It's against their grain. And as a society, I just hope one day we can find a way to have schools that honor people like Oscar Schindler and honor people like my brother, because my first book is called Movers, Dreamers, and Risk Takers. And I believe that the people like my brother, like Oscar Schindler, like your son, these are movers. These are people who shake things up. These are people who change the world. But so often their experiences in school, those early experiences push them down. They suppress their initiative. They suppress their drive. They suppress their positive messages. They give them negative messages about simply who they are.
Right, because in school, his grades never reflected his ability. Like I said, he barely made it out of high school. But then when he went to culinary school, he was getting A's. His confidence was back. He was very happy and doing very well because he was always, cooking is one of those things, like you said, you're always in motion, you're creating, it's new. So what you're saying explains a lot about his gifts and abilities, but also, the things that were potentially hampering him during high school.
Given everything that you've said, and my experiences were different in the sense that the exposure to ADHD as well as learning disabilities was diagnosed very young. And my research at the time led me into systems that had integrative programs, which were able to support, even though sometimes it was a constant fight. In other words, giving her an extra year in middle school, giving her an extra year in high school, getting her out of special needs and into vocational school, because they had convinced me that special needs would prepare her for life better, when in fact a vocational school prepared her much better by allowing her to pursue courses in childcare. So she's excellent at what she does with small children. Her learning disabilities, which are more math related, therefore do not impact children from 6 months to 4 years of age, which is where she specializes. And in over 35 years, she's been very successful in that environment. But the ability to get from point A to the point we are now is a book unto itself, if you'd like to write it. But because it shows a vocation that came out of exactly what you said, which was identifying the strengths and then nurturing those strengths, celebrating those strengths, making sure she understood how important they were, celebrating her graduation, celebrating the fact that every 5 years she gets a recertification. So all of these things, again, with positive reinforcement, help to somewhat stabilize her life. But in your Movers, Dreamers, and Risk Takers, and some of your other books, you've obviously done incredible research on this subject. And currently in the school, from what Joanne has said, because her situation, my child is older, your brother is a little older than my daughter, her son is a lot younger. In all the research that you've done, where are you finding, I found an integrated school system, which was in a region that was close to where we could move to. And I was the first parent, I later found out, that ever went into a school system and said, I have a child coming in that has special needs, and I want to make sure she's in the program from day one. Most parents sometimes are reluctant, and also there's so much stigma, there's so much confusion, and there doesn't seem to be a clear path depending on what the diagnosis is. When you are treating children and then having to deal with the school system, have you found a particular school system that's getting this right?
Make me come back to that question if I veer off, but I want to say a couple things. Think about the skills and commitment and executive functioning that you needed to have in order to find a school district, sell your house, move to a new district, contact the new district. Think about the type of person you are. You're rare. I hate to tell you.
Right.
Most people don't have those skills. And if they have those skills, they don't have the wherewithal to uproot and create a new life. Kudos to you, and how blessed your daughter is to have had a mother like you, But most people are not going to be able to pull that off. I live in the state of Michigan, which is one of the worst states in the country in how we treat special needs folks. If you're just sort of garden variety ADHD, yeah, you might do okay. But boy, once you start getting into heavier needs and greater needs, my state is pathetic. In fact, I have a good friend named Marianne Lipset. And Marcee basically does kind of what you do, except she does it in a somewhat antagonistic way. She has to go to school districts and threaten lawsuits in order to get school districts to accommodate children's needs. I like to say, if you have a problem with your special needs child, dial 1-800-MARCEE. But that's just a little joke. I'm hoping I'm going to make sure Marcee listens. There's a lot of Marcees around the country, and unfortunately, we need the Marcees of the world. So did Peppermint Patty, but that's a story for another time. Did you get that joke at least?
Yes, I did get that joke.
Thank you. And the Peanuts Christmas special is coming up, so we need to start working about that. Unfortunately, people like Marcee are needed in this world. Parents like you are often made to feel that you're doing something wrong. You're a burden. You're a bother.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That's
right.
exactly how I felt.
Marianne. Joanne. And, all you're trying to do is get your kid a fair shake. And you've discovered something, Marianne. You discovered that your daughter does have gifts to give to the world. And luckily, she was in a system that helped her at a young age develop those gifts. I just don't understand why school doesn't do that more often. But I think it's getting worse. Educational budgets are being cut. When educational budgets are being cut, the special needs kids, the ADHD kids are the ones that's suffering. And I'm going to tell you something else. There's a lot of wonderful teachers out there.
Yes.
There's a lot of great teachers, but more and more I don't see the goofballs and the fun wacko teachers that I used to. I see a lot more seriousness in the teaching world than I used to. And it kind of concerns me because, when the three of us were in school, there was always that one really crazy. Yeah. I have kids that I work with now, and I ask them, I'm like, is there one, you got one really fun teacher? And a lot of the kids say no. Well, there were always fun, wacko teachers that made us want to go to school, made us want to go to their class. I just see fewer and fewer of those.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the quest is what I found with the school system is this quest to turn every kid into an advanced placement kid to get them into Harvard and Princeton and Yale. And not all kids want to go to those types of schools or should be going to those sort of schools. There's nothing wrong with the trades. They don't push for that. And I think that quest is driving the type of teachers they're hiring, which are the more serious, ones that deal with these perfect students who can fall into advanced placement, and less teachers that are able to communicate and effectively engage children that have learning disabilities and maybe aren't that perfect AP student.
I could not agree with you more. And, you know, I used to teach, and that's one of the reasons I don't teach anymore in a school, because I was finding myself burdened by this very drive in school systems that you guys are talking about. And, you know, the funny thing is I haven't taught school in 20 years, and I still have kids come, you know, they're now in their 30s, because I'm getting old. And they still tell me stuff they learned from me, because, you know, I used to make up songs, and, you know, I would veer off track, and if somebody was interested in something, we'd veer off track, and kids remember that stuff.
Yeah,
they definitely do. I still remember the teachers that I had one teacher that used to come in and play the guitar, and he'd, you know, sing the history stories to you. I remember anything he ever taught me in that class.
You're gonna find less of that. Like, I had a guy like that named Father Ned Donaher, God rest his soul. He'd be about 93 nowadays. And Father Donaher made up a song called The Bible Beat. And because he was my freshman theology teacher, I went to Catholic school called Catholic Central. And it basically took and made 25 verses out of the Old Testament. And I know every verse. Abraham, the patriarch, was the man who left his house. 1850 was the year he began his great career. He received an honored place as the father of the chosen race. That went on and on and on, but I still remember it. This is this is 35 years ago. I have a friend.
That is so funny.
Yeah, I got a friend named Jacob Levy, and Jacob Levy tutors students, some of my students, and Jacob Levy is a master of making up mnemonic devices to help students learn, and he does this in song. He's a composer as well. And if anybody's listening and you have a child who needs help, Jacob Levy, if you get my email, I'll be happy to give you his contact.
Yes, and we will have all your contact information on our website, so they can always get to you, and then you can refer them to Jacob or Miss Marcee or whoever the other lady was.
Miss Marcee. I think that's her new nickname. You've just come across it. 1-800 Miss Marcee. I like that.
There you go. Listen, I have to tell you, Kevin, I imagine I was definitely a little, I guess I was very ADHD in school, but like you, was able to get by. I usually was daydreaming out the window because I wanted to be a movie star, and the lessons were less important, but I passed. But now I regale my grandchildren with stories about activities within detention. And much to my older daughter's chagrin, she says, "Mom, please don't tell the kids really, how bad a student you were." And I go, "Listen, I can't help it. It's part of my life story. The kids are great. They're all doing great in school. They could care less. They just think it's hysterical that, Mimi at one time in detention, like you went to Catholic school. I'm in detention because I said I brought my homework and I didn't do it. They threw another boy in the cloakroom, and I found a box, and I said, "Well, look at this, Alex." I go, "These are cleaning rags." "Well, wait a minute." I said, "It has Sister Mary Leo's name on it." And what it was half her bra. So I put it on my head and I danced around like it was a yarmulke. And then the nun came swinging through the door, and there were Alex and I dancing around with the half of bras on our head like we were pretending to be Jewish rabbis. And of course, I got detention again. But hey, made me happy.
Wow. One of the things that happens that I've struggled with is that when you are an ADHD or in the classroom, you get the finger pointed at you a lot. And so some of us, like me, end up lying. And I used to lie. And I got very good at it. And in fact, in 7th grade, I didn't do my 7th grade science project, which was a major portion of the grade. And I made up an elaborate story. I was a storyteller from a young age. And I was 12 years old, and I made up a story that my mother and stepfather were having marital problems. And they were fighting all the time, and I can't get anything done. All all lies. Back in those days, like if it happened now, like, you know, they probably called Child Protective Services or something.
Right.
But nobody, you know, nobody wanted to talk about that stuff. So Mrs. Komar, God love her, she made me come, like I had to stay after school for like 2 weeks for an hour at a time and help her in the science room.
I was great at working with the school student body because I usually was the only person in detention. And when you're in detention for 2 years solid, you get to be friends with all the upperclassmen. You did
And
that.
the administrator, you probably have the school secretary in your pocket.
Yeah, there you go.
So did I. Mrs. Powell, Jerry loved me. And I remember I'd go in the office and she'd be like, oh, hello, Kevin.
or as the principal of my academy said, when we had to go in the next day to get our diplomas because they didn't give them to us in church, they gave us a fake folder. She had a little bit of a power control thing going. So I was so afraid that she'd come up with a reason why I couldn't graduate, even though there was no reason I shouldn't graduate. And I said, you know, I told her my name, and Marianne Romano was my maiden name, and she all of a sudden she threw her pen down. There's a little nun, 5 foot tall, you know, the Sisters of Charity with the thing around their face, the little bow, cracked up. I said to myself, oh, this is how she's going to do it. She's going to have a nervous breakdown. I'm never getting my diploma. This is what she's going to do. And finally she looked up and she said, do you really think that with all the trouble you've caused, I would ever forget your name? So, I mean, I don't consider dancing around with a bra on your head or wearing a hair bun to be like, you know, that's the kind of stuff it was, you know, back in the day. I'm thinking, Joe, as we're talking with Kevin, I'm incredulous. Now, granted, I understand Michigan's under tremendous duress. My older daughter is fortunate enough to live with her husband in fairly affluent area, so her children have the benefit of a really superior school system. However, she has a dear friend who works in special needs, and my daughter's on the board of education. And she said that it is just horrendous what the teachers have to go through to try to get the curriculums that they need and make the progress that they need to make because they're so restricted by so many different laws or the lack of supplies or the lack of support. And I was married to a teacher, and that was the script back in the 60s and 70s. It's the script I'm hearing now. It leads us to understand that one of the things, Joe, we really need to look at is what's going on. We're talking about health. That's our focus, healthcare. But health is integrated along with education. You can't really separate them because one works off the other. You know, when you're healthy, then you find your passion or you find what you want to do, or hopefully may take a couple of different paths, many different paths perhaps. You can be healthy and not have the education you need to find your passion or help to support you to do what you want to do. And I guess what I'm hearing today is that perhaps I'm thinking about Maria Shriver. Maria Shriver, Kevin, has a show called Architects of Change, and she interviews people. We've been in touch with her, and I'm going to get in touch with her again, but she has a tremendous rapport, especially because of the the special needs project that the Special Olympics that her mom and dad and her family was so actively involved in. But in addition to that, there's the everyday stresses that we need to try to make better. And clearly, I mean, just the water situation alone in Flint, I can't even go there because that'll get me crazy altogether. Because of course, those things also impact the children.
You've hit the nail on the head with that, Marianne. It's not just the educational aspect. I think there does need to be change in how, the methods in which they teach children at the schools, and identifying ADHD in a very earlier stage, and then having programs where they can learn the way they need to learn. But the environment too, because to Kevin, your point, the way the school system makes you feel is like you're a loser and you're defective and you don't belong. And then these kids can be very cruel to one another too. So once you're put into a special needs class or whatever, then they used to refer to my son as the SPED. That stigma hits them. So that whole environment is exacerbating the issues we're having with with healthcare in this country and with mental health. And some of that can also lead to other negative behaviors. So Kevin, I've heard that people who suffer from ADHD also are more prone to addictive behaviors like cyber addiction and substance abuse. Can you talk a little bit about that?
People with ADHD are at heightened risk for all addictions. And when you consider that fact, plus the whole cyber addiction angle, there's a nexus. There's something that's common to those. People with ADHD, we are not generally engaged and activated by routine and normal reality. And so we struggle to find life satisfying. We struggle to find experiences that satisfy and fully engage us. I mean, addiction is, I'm not happy with reality. I'm going to make things more exciting and more interesting, and I'm going to use that substance or that addictive behavior of choice to change that. And so if you think about the internet or video games or people who get entranced by Facebook, we're pursuing a sense of satisfaction, which really is what we psychologically talk about as reward. We want those little micro packages of reward, of satisfaction that we get from, okay, I'm checking my email. Now I'm going to Facebook. Now I'm going to watch a YouTube video. Oh, that was interesting. Now I'm going to look that up. Now I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to get these little micro satisfactions along the way. So a lot of us are becoming addicted to that, especially those of us with ADHD. And certainly in general, ADHD, I mean, when I have teenagers, one of the things that I work with, one of the things that we talk about all the time is addiction. Have you started drinking yet? Hey, are you thinking about doing marijuana? How's that vaping going? I'm going to tell you, the vaping is an epidemic. I mean, I can't tell you, I live in a rather affluent school district, and I think about half the kids at the high school are vaping. The addiction in general and the cyber addiction, it all gets back to how our brains are constructed. And those of us with ADHD have brains that struggle to find life satisfying, to have that sense of satisfaction, to find, as we talked about with Oskar Schindler, a sense of purpose. And so when I don't find something positive to satisfy me, to activate me, to give me a sense of purpose, I, as an ADHD individual or as a person prone to addiction, I will create that negatively.
So what's the treatment for that? Is it going back to the medications? Is it counseling? I mean, how do you prevent these negative behaviors? Or if they become a cyber addict or addicted to substances, what's the best way to treat somebody who, has ADHD and an addiction problem?
People I work with, when they take their medication, they don't seem to need whether it's the video game or the online behavior of choice. They don't get the same thrill from it when they're on their medication. Ned Hallowell put out a book with John Rady many years ago called Driven to Distraction. And the idea is that, we're distracted and our attention is constantly shifting because we need to bring in new sources of stimulation to feel satisfied. And that paradigm is particularly accurate and applicable to the internet, because that's what we're all doing with the internet. So what is the treatment? Well, as with any addiction or excessive behavior, the first step is always, I have to admit there's a problem. I've written a couple books on this. One of them is Cyber Junkie, Escape the Gaming and the Internet Trap. And the other one is Get Off That Game Now, The Essential Family Guide to Healthy Screen Behavior. Both of those books offer step-by-step guides for how to deal with this. But let me give you a synopsis. Again, admit there's a problem. And then whenever we find an excessive, like if we're talking cyber addiction, whenever we find an excessive user of the screen, we almost always see other issues that are in play. I find a lot of people that come to me end up going on to be diagnosed with anxiety, depression, social anxiety. I've had a number of teenagers and young adults, after working with them for a while, we discovered that what had pushed them to the internet or to a game or to the screen and excessive use was a bullying incident that had gone unreported. So it's that whole iceberg idea that the surface behavior is often just the manifestation of some deeper stuff going on. So you have to treat those underlying conditions, whether it's ADHD, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever it happens to be. I've had a number of people come to me with young people who were addicted to the game World of Warcraft who went on to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I don't know what the connection is there, but I've had too many people of that description come through my doors to not think that something's going on. I'm not saying that World of Warcraft is creating bipolar, but I'm just thinking that people with those types of issues for some reason seem to be drawn to that particular game.
When you look back years ago, I'm thinking with my own children, it was Mr. Rogers and it was Sesame Street. And so there was a limited amount of television. And then the TV, they played. They played with their toys. They played with their friends. They went outside. My older daughter with the children has been very, very astute at minimizing the amount of screen time, both for the iPads, phones, TV. She monitors it very well. Having said that, I can see where it's new technology that's invading our brains. So I know myself, I can be on that iPad 3 hours easily. I have to literally tell myself, shut it down, get off, leave some time and go to sleep, because otherwise I'd be on all night. And I'm sure other people don't do that, but I'm one of those people that's prone to addictive behavior.
I also heard that you're prone to sticking nuns' bras on your head. another problem that
that's
you have.
That negative stimulation you were talking about.
Right, that's that changing reality to get extra stimulation there.
Yes, exactly. There you go. How do people access your program, and are there other people doing what you do? Because I'm sure once parents start to hear this podcast, they're going to want help for their child.
I'm going to risk sounding very immodest. I am my own category.
Okay.
Nobody does exactly what I do. And what I do is I work one-on-one with and in groups with young people, young adults. I can do that on Skype. I can do that on phone. If you're a parent out there and you want some support in your area, I would certainly entertain an email from you. I'm very focused on school, and I'm very focused on parent coaching. If people want to get a hold of me, they can send me an email to cyberjunkie512@gmail.com. That's one of the emails I use, and it's the title of my first book, Cyber, CYBERJUN like Nancy, KIE, cyberjunkie512@gmail.com. And then go to my website, kevinjroberts.net. Don't forget the J, kevinjroberts.net. And not .com, it's .net, kevinjroberts.net. And you can access my books on there, and I got a lot of blogs and different things, and happy to help in any way I can. And if people want the books, they're all available on Amazon.
You've been a wonderful guest, and this has been so helpful for me, and I'm sure for you too, Marianne.
With clarity, with steps, with perhaps a bridge. You can create a bridge, Kevin. If we build on what you're doing and we can expand that, maybe we can start to change some of the way education has been approaching these children all along. It's a national epidemic. It's a worldwide epidemic, but we see it more in industrialized countries because they have access to things that, where other children are hoping to be able to get enough food to eat. We live in a world where the children have access to a lot of mobile types of electronics. So thank you very much, Kevin. Joanne, we'll both be in touch with you. We'll do a follow-up, and on that next podcast to talk about Get Off That Game Now and the Essential Family Guide to Healthy Screen Behavior. We'll do the podcast on that.
Visit our website at edstreetp.com. Don't forget to share our podcast with your family and friends.
Thank you for listening to Getting to the Core Issues, where we bring you solutions for solving the healthcare puzzle.